Good evening, and first of all I'd like to say thank you for the invitation for Tamara and I to come and join this event this evening. The speakers have been such eminent speakers, and it's humbling to stand in the spot where they've been standing for 8 nights. This evening we have Tamara Lorincz, and I am delighted to be bringing this evening with Tamara, who is really going to be able to share her enormous experience with us. Tamara is a PhD student with the University of Waterloo in the Balsillie School of International Affairs, and her research, her PhD research, is on climate and the environmental impacts of the military. Tamara has worked for many years, over 20 years, as a Palestinian supporter and resistance worker, and she will share with you some of these exciting experiences around that. But more, from Tamara you will be able to share the enormous sense of commitment that Tamara has. She's not just a regular activist person, she's a person who has devoted her life to the authenticity and the importance of us moving forward, facing the facts and facing the truth. So Tamara's tenacity will come across in her presentation, and we're very, very fortunate to have her. Tamara actually just came back from Washington, D.C. at midnight last night. She's been there for 10 days and for the NATO protest, and so she will be addressing that too. So,
and say something about yourself in the grief walk.
So, yes, okay. My name is Irene O'Toole. It's not Wendy, but I answer to Wendy. But it's Irene O'Toole, and I'm from Waterloo. And thanks to the vision and leadership of Robert Massoud, we were able to start an organisation called Waterloo Region Friends of Palestine. And we started that organisation 2 years ago. And now, since October the 7th, we have a walk with grief every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. in Waterloo, and we have even actually got our federal MP and our provincial MP who walk most weeks with us whenever they're in town. It's been a very supported initiative, and we also have other kinds of events going on as well. And last September in Waterloo we started the Palestinian Solidarity Network, which is 14 community groups in Kitchener-Waterloo that are working for Palestine. So we came together, and now we plan together very often. So it's really been a growing and strengthening group, and it was Robert Massoud who planted the seed and watered it. So we're very thrilled. So now I'd like to just call on Tamara to come and do her presentation, which is PowerPoint. That's why she's walking over there. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Great. And I hope that you can see my slides. I have some good slides, so feel free to move a little bit if you can't see my slides very well. And I'll put the timer on. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you this evening. I would like to begin by expressing my profound sorrow and despair for the Palestinian people and my outrage by what Israel is doing with the complicity of my government, of the Canadian government. I am going to speak to you tonight about the activism that I've done over the past 10 days in Washington, D.C., both for Palestine and also against NATO. And I would like to explain to you the connection between these two things that I've been working on. So, if you think about how the media has portrayed this Russia-Ukraine war and how the Canadian government has portrayed this Russia-Ukraine war and how the media and the government talk about, they call it the Israel-Hamas war, but you know it is a genocide against the Palestinian people. There are some differences, but it represents this duplicity and this deception and double standards by our government and our mainstream media. So there's no context given, for instance, behind October 7th. What's happened to the Palestinian people for decades. There's no context as well given for why Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th. We're never told that Canada has undermined the Minsk agreements in Ukraine that would have prevented this conflict from escalating. Canada has undermined a two-state solution by supporting settlement expansion and always voting for Israel at the United Nations and against Palestine. Canada is sending weapons to Ukraine, and Canada is sending weapons to Israel. Canada refuses to engage in diplomacy to try to end the war in Ukraine. And as I said, resolution after resolution, Canada is voting against Palestine at the General Assembly and at the Human Rights Council as well. And it took 2 months for Canada to call for a ceasefire for Gaza, and Canada still is not calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine. So we need to ask, what is really going on? The other thing is, if you follow the social media accounts of the Department of National Defense and Global Affairs Canada, you can see that they talk about disinformation that Russia is propagating, right? But then they say that they have all of the facts about what Russia is really doing in Ukraine, but then they don't. The Canadian government and our military and our intelligence services, can't tell us who is bombing the hospitals in Gaza. It's ridiculous. It just represents these double standards. And then think about the International Criminal Court. Within 3 weeks of Russia invading Ukraine, they issued an arrest warrant for President Putin for the unlawful detention of children. But what was Russia really doing? They were moving children away from the contact line out of harm's way. But our government and our media are silent about the thousands and thousands of children that are maimed, injured, burned, dead, buried under rubble. They're silent. And how come the ICC still hasn't issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu for war crimes committed against children in Gaza? Again, these double standards that we see. NATO this past week, during the NATO summit in Washington, D.C., NATO condemned Russia's bombing of a hospital in Kyiv. Russia has denied this. But in the past week, as you all know, Israel bombed a UN school and also bombed again the Al-Ahira hospital. And there was no condemnation by any of the NATO leaders, right? But we know for a fact that Israel bombed the school and the hospitals. So we have to ask, why is it different? Why is the government different and the media different in conveying and explaining these two wars going on? I also want to mention the connection between Israel and NATO. A lot of people don't know about this. It was in 1987 that President Reagan designated Israel as a major non-NATO ally. Now, this is really significant, and this took place at the time when the United States was conducting dirty wars in Central America with the help of Israel. And in 1994, NATO established a Mediterranean dialogue with 5 countries in the region, including Israel, supposedly to bring about stability in the region. But of course, you know that there has just been instability and chaos and war in the region. In 2016, Israel established an office at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. And in the past 8 years, there have been regular trips between Brussels and Tel Aviv, NATO leaders and the Israeli leadership going back and forth, working together. And NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has constantly called Israel a vital ally to NATO and a vital partner in the Middle East. And 5 days after October 7th, Israel had a special meeting with NATO leaders. This was over Zoom, and the NATO leaders coordinated with Israel in the transfer of weapons for this genocide that is unfolding in Gaza. So what is happening in Gaza is a NATO war. We need to be clear about that. And then if you have been following this NATO summit in Washington, D.C., and if you read the declaration that came out, which is a declaration of war against the world, you will see that NATO is setting up offices in Kuwait and in Jordan. And this is just going to lead to more war and chaos in the region. And you might have recalled this headline. This was in April of 2022. Zelensky said, "Make Ukraine the Israel in Europe." I mean, you understand what this means, and you can see the connection between what is going on in Israel and what is going on in Ukraine. And then in this Washington summit declaration that just came out, friends, it is a blueprint for a global war. And what we are seeing right now taking place in Gaza, we need to understand that it is part of this global war. It is a war against Russia through Ukraine. It is a war against the Palestinians and the Iranians. They mentioned Iran in this declaration, and it is a war against China through Taiwan. This is why the Canadian government is sending $30 million of weapons to Taiwan to prepare for this global war. So we have to understand it in this context. This is why this moment is so dangerous, friends, and why we need to be in solidarity with each other and calling for an end to the war in Ukraine, no war against China, and why we need to end this genocide in Gaza. So now I would like to show you very quickly some pictures of the things that I've been doing in Washington, D.C. the past week and a half. So I was there representing the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom on these events related to No to NATO, Yes to Peace. It was an international conference and actions, and we were also doing many actions for Free Palestine. So, for instance, the week and a half kicked off with this event with all of these activists coming from around the world at this iconic place in Washington, D.C. called Busboys and Poets. Has anybody heard of it, or has anybody been there? If you're ever in Washington, D.C., you have to go to this place because it's got a bookstore of all of these progressive books, and they always are constantly having all of these fantastic events. Now, how many people have seen Sam Husseini, that really great, brave journalist who's at the State Department briefing? Sam Husseini, so there's that is Sam Husseini's head right there in the blue shirt. So it was great to meet him. He did a press release about a speech that I gave at this event, and it was great. Now I have his contact information and we're able to collaborate. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. There was a big conference on the Saturday, full day, speakers from around the world making connections to not only the Middle East and the war in Ukraine, but also this escalating conflict in Asia. It's very dangerous, friends, what is taking place. A highlight for me is interacting with Black Alliance for Peace. This is a great group of Black activists in the United States. Has anybody heard of this group, Black Alliance for Peace? I encourage you to follow them on social media. Really great, incisive analysis about what is going on in the world, and they are making the connections. So you can see me with some of these amazing activists oppose the US, EU, NATO axis of domination. And then they have this one, NATO equals white supremacy. And this is really important. NATO is maintaining white supremacy and terrorism. And this is exactly what they call it. So this is why I like my friends with Black Alliance for Peace, because they are unequivocal in their condemnation of NATO. They know exactly what is going on. Then another event that took place that was so fantastic with over 300 youth activists was another fantastic conference resisting NATO and supporting armed struggle, supporting what the Palestinians are doing in Gaza. There were just fantastic speakers there, so you can see, support Palestinian resistance, support people's struggle. This is us. The following day on Sunday in front of the White House with our banners, you can see Free Palestine, Disband NATO right in front of the White House. And friends, it was so cathartic to stand in front of the Biden administration there and say, U.S. imperialist #1 terrorist. It was extremely cathartic. I yelled it very loud. This is what we were saying. Maybe we should do it together. Let's do it together. Let's get out our energy. U.S. imperialist #1 terrorist. That's what we were saying in front of the White House. Okay. Anyways, so you can see there's other banners here. No more U.S. weapons for Israel and Ukraine. Making those connections there. American missiles are killing children, both in Ukraine and in Gaza. So this is where the NATO summit was held at the Washington Convention Center. There was so much security there, 2 rows of gates. It was unbelievable. It was very difficult for the people of the city to get around. It felt like a war zone. Oh, here, let me just go back. Do you see there were tanks on the street? There was police cars all over in riot gear. We stood outside one of the gates where the cars came through, so you can see we're with the Palestinian Youth Movement of Washington, D.C. So we were all broken up into the different entrances, and we were so glad that this was the entrance where President Biden came through. If you've ever seen his motorcade, it begins with about 10 motorcycles, then a whole bunch of black armored vehicles, and then his fancy car with all of the flags around it. But we were shouting and yelling at him. It was so great. Now, around the city, I was very heartened to see these signs around, so you can see all over the Capitol. You've got these, Stop Arming Israel, Liberate Palestine. This was really great. And then this church right across the street from the Capitol and the Supreme Court. You can't see that sign very well, but it says, ceasefire in Gaza, and justice for Palestinian civilians. This is right there on Pennsylvania Avenue, right there by the Capitol buildings. It's so great. Then one of the nights, there was a big dinner for the NATO foreign ministers. So Blinken was there with all of the other NATO foreign ministers having this fancy dinner. They were out on the balcony with their wine glasses and their canapes. And there we were with our signs, Free Palestine, No to NATO, Yes to Peace. And we had our big mics, and we were chanting at them, Gaza is starving while you're whining and dining, shame on you, things like that. And then that evening, after we did this protest at Blinken's dinner, we went to his house. So for the past 167 days, there has been an encampment outside of Blinken's house. It started 2 weeks, mid-October, and they're 24/7. So you can see on one side of the street are the supplies for the encampment. On the other side of the street, you can see, this is right in front of his house, bloody Blinken, U.S. complicit in war crimes, Israel is bombing civilians, this kind of thing. So there's tents, the big banners there. You can see another close-up of the tents. Now they're in all types of weather, right throughout the winter, rain, shine, sleet, or hail. And when Blinken drives up, when he comes out in the morning and he drives home at night, they have these big jugs of like red blood prepared so that they spray it onto the road as he's driving. So this was great. This was right in front of his house. You can't see it very well, but there's 3 police vehicles there. Sorry, it was dark because we went in the evening, but just before 9 o'clock, we have to be silent at 9 o'clock. The encampment has to be silent at 9 o'clock, but just before 9, they have these big loudspeakers and they're chanting at his house, and it was so great to be able to chant at Blinken. And so that's what we did one night. Another thing that I participated in is the protest at the Pentagon. This happens every Monday morning for 40 years, and it's organized by Catholic workers. And when the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of workers are coming into the Pentagon, we were there with our banners, and you can see this Catholic worker here, U.S. and Israel guilty of genocide, and then our other banners, no to NATO, yes to peace. And then we spent a full day at the Capitol lobbying the representatives. And so this is the meeting that we have in the cafeteria, and then we went out and we started to meet with all of the representatives. This was us with the Massachusetts representative, Jim McGovern. He is supportive of the Palestinians, and he's doing what he can, but he is a very rare voice. But you can see that I'm with Code Pink's Packy Wayland, and there's more pictures of us. There was a number of groups that were lobbying the legislature, and so you can see with our signs there, it says, this office supports Israeli war crimes, wearing the keffiyeh through the halls, and then you can see this. You can see this outside of many of the representatives' doors, their office doors. You can see it says, stand with Israel. Many of the representatives are standing with Israel. This is, of course, because of AIPAC funding, and then you can see as well their support for Ukraine. And so you can see this. Let me go back. Let me go back there. So you can see, oh, they're concerned about the hostages, right? But they're not concerned about the thousands and thousands of Palestinians that have been in Israeli jails, tortured for years. They're not concerned about that, but they're standing with Israel. But there are also a couple of representatives that had signed that said Americans against Islamophobia. This was encouraging. So you can see that. I stand against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. So they are making taking some sort of stand there. Let me just go back, sorry. So you can see Medea Benjamin. How many people follow Medea Benjamin and Code Pink on social media? You must. It's very exhilarating. She's very courageous. They're standing up, taking on Blinken with their bloody hands in Parliament. In Congress. So you can be sure to follow them. So that's some of the lobbying that we did. And the tall man standing there in the middle is Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel. So we were also, we've been also working on protecting Julian Assange and getting him out of prison for many years. Another thing that I did in Washington, D.C., because the countries of Latin America, for instance, Nicaragua, Cuba, very supportive of Palestine, and we had a fantastic event at the Nicaraguan embassy. There were presentations about this idea of a zone of peace, and I will say something more in a minute. I know that I need to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but I want to say something very quickly in my last remaining minutes about Canada and militarism. There is a misperception in this country that Canada is a peacekeeping country. Sometimes we might do some bad things with the United States, but generally we're doing good things in the world. This is what a lot of Canadians think. This is not the case. This is not the case. And this is proof of that. This is the latest from the UN Peacekeeping Office. Canada is at its lowest level of peacekeeping in the past 30 years. We are currently ranked 70th with 38 soldiers wearing the UN blue helmet on UN peace support operations. So where are our soldiers? If we're not doing peacekeeping, what are they doing? They are on US NATO operations all over the world. That's what they're doing. We have one group, 1,000 in Latvia, leading a NATO battle group, right on Russia's borders. Now look at the United States, the largest army in the world, the most well-funded army in the world, right, with $900 billion. They have, how many there? Like 30 soldiers wearing the UN blue helmet, and they are ranked 79th in the world. Canada and the United States are not serious about peace and peacekeeping. You know that, but I just wanted to show proof of that. What Canada has been doing for the past 25 years is a lot of aggression with the United States and NATO. So Canada bombed the former Yugoslavia in 1999 and broke up Yugoslavia. And that is what we want to do to Russia through Ukraine. We want to bomb and break up Russia so that we can control it. We had a 12-year combat mission in Afghanistan where we tortured people with no accountability. We overthrew the government of Haiti 20 years ago with the United States and France. Haiti is in complete devastation now. It's absolutely shameful. The people of Port, there's not one elected official in Haiti right now. We overthrew their democratically elected, beloved priest of the port, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. We tried to overthrow the government of Venezuela 5 years ago. Thankfully, we didn't succeed, but we have illegal sanctions against Venezuela and many other countries without any UN authorization that are causing tremendous suffering to people. And we are sending weapons to Ukraine, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel. Canada's arms exports at our record high. We send over $2.1 billion in weapons all over the world. And Canada is not going to join this new UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons because of our membership in NATO. And the other thing is Canada is massively increasing military spending, and this is really important. I'm going to show the slide about military spending in a moment. But just to say, look at this. This is from our Chief of Defense Staff. Last October, he said Canada is at war with Russia and China. So now we are preparing for this. This is so dangerous, friends. We really need to change course, and we need to make friends with Russia and China. This is one of the reasons why in November of 2022, I went on a 1-month tour, Egypt, Russia, Finland, Latvia, Poland, and Romania, to learn more about Russia. I've been trying to go to Iran, and I haven't been able to go. I want to go to China because I am not going to live. I'm not going to accept this new Cold War. I am going to transcend, and I am going to make friends with all countries. And this is what I am encouraging other people to do. If our government will not engage in peace building, then it is up to us to do it. So we need to make friends with all countries and end these wars. Okay, so I know I need to wrap up, but I just want to bring this to your attention because I think as Canadians, we really need to be aware of this. In April, our federal budget came out, and I want you to just see that we are going to be spending so much more money to have a stronger defense, but all of this money that we're spending on our military is money that we are not spending for our children, healthcare, education, climate action, and peace building. So in the federal budget, it says stronger defense, and look at this, unwavering support for Ukraine is one of the main aspects of our federal budget. Why is it this it? Why is it not support for peace? Why is it support for Palestine? But we're supporting Ukraine with billions and billions of dollars for weapons. Why? Why are we doing this? The other thing that is a main feature of our federal budget is, look at this, enhancing our intelligence services. This is very troubling because it shows the connection between our intelligence services and the United States. So we need to be very concerned about this. And then in the federal budget, it shows this chart. Look at the dramatic rise and the planned rise of military spending until 2030. Friends, in whatever way you can, please speak out on this. Say we do not want a militarized foreign policy, we don't want a militarized domestic policy, and we don't want this increase our tax dollars to go to this military spending because it's not in the best interest of our children and our future generations. So I know I need to wrap up. We have a new defense policy. Terrible. Have a look at it. It's very terrible. One of the things that it's going to do, our defense policy, is going to militarize the Arctic. The Arctic is the traditional homeland of the Inuit people. The Canadian Inuit people have said regularly to the government, we want the Arctic to be a zone of peace. But what does NATO and the United States want for the Canadian Arctic? They want to militarize it with permanent bases, fighter jets, submarines, attack helicopters. This is wrong. We have to stop this. So this is why the groups that I am with, we have this campaign to stop the militarization of the Arctic. They want this as a new theater of war to plan for their war against Russia and China. So we need to stop this. And then I want to just bring to your attention, if you are interested, we have a great, for the women in the audience, we have a great monthly newsletter, the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. Please join it. Join the newsletter. It's free. And all of these amazing peace initiatives and campaigns that we're doing, one of the campaigns that we are doing is a peace walk in Nova Scotia. It's a multi-faith and also non-denominational. It's an open peace walk that's happening in September from Pugwash, Nova Scotia to Halifax, Nova Scotia. We would love for you to join us. There's people from India and the United States going to walk for peace. So please join if you can. I also want to let you know, take a photo of this. Please sign the petition to call for Canada out of NATO. NATO is, a US-led nuclear-armed military alliance that's causing wars everywhere. We need thousands of signatures on this parliamentary petition. Help us withdraw Canada from NATO and join the international community, right? 162 countries are not members of NATO. We need to be in solidarity with them and cooperating on the real challenges that we have in the world. And then how many of you know about the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute? How many people? You don't? You must take a picture of this. This is an excellent organization. How many people of you know Dimitri Lascaris and Eve Engler? Okay, we are all involved in this, so please join the e-newsletter. It's excellent. We've got great petitions and webinars and actions, and you should join this e-newsletter. And then finally, of course, I'm ending on this. Help us abolish NATO and end U.S. domination and terrorism, and help us be in solidarity for peace with everyone in the world. Thanks very much. I will leave some free, the Space Alert, the Global Network Against Nuclear Power and Weapons in Space. It's a U.S. organization. I love these people. I have an article here about the weaponization or the militarization of the Arctic that you might be interested in. And then, if it's appropriate, you can tell me if it's not. But we have been regularly collecting signatures. You don't have to write your name. You print your name. You can just sign it anywhere. But we have letters calling on Minister Joly and the Prime Minister Trudeau for an arms embargo against Israel and to end the genocide in Gaza. Another one on ending the war in Ukraine. And and also if you would like, I can collect signatures if you would like to join these e-newsletters. So I will pass around these. There's no obligation, friends. And I also have some pins, and we can, I'm happy to take questions. I think I've gone on a little too long. Sorry. I have so much to tell you about.
Anybody have a question? If anybody has a question, just get up and shout it out.
Yeah.
To Tamara.
What do you think? Like, do you see these connections, between what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening against China? What are your thoughts? What do you think? Don't be shy. Any reactions or what I said? Are you? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how much can Canada align itself with the U.S. considering we're such close neighbors and we share a border and all
we take a couple? That's a great point. That's a great point. And I'd love to hear, your thoughts about this. But also, I have a thought about this. But maybe we could get a couple other questions or comments, ideas. Anything you want to share?
I agree that there is a lot of similarity between the two cases, because after all, it is really NATO that are doing these things, so I would assume that their outlook towards these things are similar. It's just that it doesn't come across. And I really like the line about how you said what's happening in Palestine, it's a NATO thing. Because sometimes we kind of sort of focus on the United States, but it really is a NATO thing. And after, like what happened after October 7th, all of the European leaders visited Israel, they supported them, and they continue to support them, so for sure.
Yeah, it's really important for us to understand this because NATO is so dangerous. NATO is really a US-led bully club. And we need to be in solidarity with each other because it's going to require all of us to take this on. Other thoughts or questions or anything? Maybe just, if I could just briefly address what you said about Canada being on the border of the United States. I think about this, how difficult it would be for us to have a real sovereign foreign policy or sovereign or independent foreign policy to the U.S. But what gives me hope is Mexico. Mexico also shares a border with the United States, and Mexico is part of the non-aligned movement. Mexico led negotiations for this new nuclear ban treaty. Mexico has expressed solidarity with Palestine. And then remember AMLO, the former president, Obrador of Mexico. Do you remember, he would give daily press conferences. And I will never forget, this was a couple of years ago, he held a press conference to stand and speak out in solidarity for Julian Assange, something that our government has never done once, expressed any sympathy and concern for Julian Assange. But the president of Mexico gave a press conference for Julian Assange, and next to him what was running was the collateral murder video. Can you imagine? This was televised. The United States knew he was doing this. That's poking the United States in the eye directly. It's unbelievable. But so there are countries that have the courage to stand up and speak out. And when people say that to me, I think let's be more like Mexico. It's not a perfect country, but let's be like Mexico. We need to have sovereignty over our foreign policy, or we're going to continue with these endless wars. We need to extricate Canada from NATO. This will help us. And we need a mass movement. We need a mass movement. Yeah, so we need to continue to be out on the streets supporting each other, ending the war in Ukraine, ending the genocide in Gaza, calling for Canada to get out of NATO. No more of this military spending. Yeah, the courage to stand up and speak out. Anything else? Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Yes? Yeah? Here and here?
Sorry, I just got in, so I'm sorry if you've already addressed this, but how do you feel about BRICS and how do you feel about them as like a counterweight to NATO?
Yeah, great. And
are there any Canadian politicians or is there a Canadian political party that is aligned to perhaps abolishing or downplaying our role in NATO?
no. And this is very depressing. This is very depressing to us. So we do not have one member of parliament who is really a voice for peace. We don't have one member of parliament who said about our federal budget, we should not be increasing military spending. We should not be buying F-35s like we announced last year. The F-35s that Israel is using to bomb Gaza, we are going to be buying 88 of them. Why? Who are we going to be bombing? Last year we announced we were going to buy fighter jets, attack helicopters, armed drones, strategic refuelers, and a whole bunch more ammunition. And none of the members of parliament said no to that, no to the military spending, and no to the new defense policy. The new defense policy that came out in April is this blueprint for a global war. So where are the peace forces? Why aren't they speaking out? This is why we have a parliamentary petition out and why we really need thousands of signatures so that we can send a signal to our elected officials that Canadians want to withdraw from NATO, and we want peace and cooperation with the world. Because, you know, NATO is undermining the United Nations. And this is exactly why countries are forming the BRICS, right? So Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America. And then this year, there's another, 16 countries that are going to be joining the BRICS, including Ethiopia and the UAE and many other countries. Chile, Colombia wants to join, and this is really great because the rest of the world is tired. They are tired of the US-NATO wars. They are tired of this unjust economic system. They are tired of the lies, the double standards, the deception. They're absolutely tired, so they want to have honest relations. I encourage you to actually look at the BRICS charter, because what it says is they want mutual benefit, non-interference in their affairs, and cooperation. Cooperation. It's beautiful, and I'm very, very supportive of BRICS, and we absolutely need a change, and we should support the BRICS. And you know, Canada. I've traveled a lot. I know I need to wrap up. In the past year and a half, I've traveled a lot in North Africa, and I was in Dubai recently for the climate summit. And you know, while I was there, the Emiratis rolled out the red carpet for Putin, and all around the city were these huge billboards, Russia Today. When I was in Africa, the African activists all said to me that they support BRICS. They know that the war in Ukraine was started by the United States, and they are very much supporting China and Russia, because China and Russia want to be honest partners in development, because most of the planet is desperate for development. And so we are seen, Canada is really seen as part of a bully club with the United States, and I think it's really very shameful. And I apologize everywhere I go because of what Canada is doing. And this is why, I try to engage in these kinds of actions, to be in solidarity with people who are working for peace and justice and global cooperation and solidarity. So, friends, I know that we're coming to the end of the time, and thank you for listening. And
so we have 15 minutes, but we take a break for refreshments before prayer. So Tamara will be here, I hope, for another 15 minutes. Tamara?
Yes, sure.
Okay,
sure.
so you can, and she's got some things that if you want to sign them or whatever, you can ask her questions or whatever the case may be. So we should put the refreshments out now, so we can have refreshments before prayer, and then you can have your chat with Tamara and Irene, Wendy.
Can I mention one other thing quickly? This scarf that I have is when I was in Turkey recently, and I participated in a big protest or a big solidarity march for Gaza, a protest against Israel's genocide. And I got this scarf given to me by someone, and also in this big march in Istanbul, they also had big signs calling for the U.S. NATO base in Syria to be closed down. So, yes.
And I was going to say, if Dimitri had won the Green Party leadership race in 2020, then maybe he would be calling for Canada to leave NATO. But
if Dimitri had won?
Yes.
If
Dimitri had won.
Yes, absolutely, and that we were really supporting him to win that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm encouraging him to run again. Let's get Dimitri to run. We need. There's going to be election in less than a year and a half, so we need to start planning, and we need to get all of the liberals and conservatives out for sure, and we need to get our people in.